60, and cosine is what ratio? You see that's the adjacent?
Oh, just one.
There you go. So there's a little pattern. I wouldn't.
You wouldn't? Yeah, stop there.
All right, we are working all at different rates, and that's okay. If you're a fast worker, get to 8. I'm gonna give you just about another minute or so, because there's some beautiful patterns happening here. And so I really want you to think about, what do you notice? And these have been really, really intentionally selected. All right, turn to your neighbor and share as far as you, if you didn't get as far, you share first, okay? And then let your partner share if they got a little further, some of the other things they discovered.
For the first one, I got sine 30 is 1 half, cosine 60 is 1 half, and then the other ones are square root of 3 over 2. Square root 3 over 2, and then square root 3 over 2. Square root 3 over 3, and then square root 3 over 3. And then I got 1 half, and I don't know what 150 was.
That one's,
Wait, which one?
this one's, they're all positive because of Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. That's the
All right, here we go. Oh, what happened to my screen?
What happened? Put it back in. Okay. All right. Mackenzie, what did you write for number 1? What is the sine of 30 degrees? Good job. And what was cosine 60? Okay, we're going across here.
Do you see, if I'm at 60, what do you know about cosine? From SOHCAHTOA. It's 1 half, okay? All right, good catch, good catch. So, what do you notice? They're the same. Then if I go over here, Lily, what was the sine of 60? Square root 3 over 2, and then what was cosine 30? Square root 3 over 2, right? Yeah. Okay, so these are the same. Now, I want us to stop and see if we can make a summary. Does anybody understand the relationship between the angle I'm putting in for sine and the angle I'm putting in for cosine? What relationship do they have? Yeah, Jay.
Is it like that the same numbers are being used?
Okay, yeah, I did use the same numbers, but but let's like pretend that you can't see the other pair, okay? If I'm just looking at the sine 30 and cosine 60, what do you notice about 30 and 60?
It's double.
Okay, it's definitely double, but that's not what I was... They're not the same. The 30 and the 60. I'm talking about just the angles, not the answers.
They equal 90.
They equal 90, okay? There we go. So here's the big idea. If I have the sine of theta, the cosine
of 90 degrees minus theta is going to be equal. And if I had also said cosine theta, that would equal the sine of 90 minus theta. So what's going to happen is we're going to get a bunch of properties. They're called the bow tie properties. You don't ever have to memorize these. You can just figure them out, okay? You just figure them out. So now with sine 30, which we already did, we said the sine 30 is 1/2. Cal, what is the sine of negative 30? Negative 1/2. So here's my big idea. The sine of negative theta is the opposite of sine theta. Do you see that? Sine of negative 30 is just the opposite of sine 30. So you just have to think about it. All right. Then, Nick, what is cosine 30 again? Square root 3 over 2. And what did you find out about cosine negative 30? They were the same, right? So here's my big idea. The cosine of negative theta is equal to cosine theta. So make sure you're jotting these down, okay? You should have all these bubbles on your papers. Again, you're not going to memorize these, and when we do the graphing, so the end of next week, we're going to start our graphing of sine and cosine. And do you remember back to our function unit, something about even and odd functions? Do you remember when we plugged a negative in and it gave the original function? Was that even or odd? When you plug negative x in for the function, and it spit out the original, was that even or odd? Even. And when we plugged in a negative x and it came out to be the opposite, that was odd. So guess what? This means that the sine function is odd, and it means the cosine function is even. This is going to be, I'm just planting seeds right now. All right, Sarah, what did you get for tangent of 30? Good job. Square root 3 over 3. And what did you get for tangent negative 30? Yeah, so here's my big idea. The tangent of negative theta is the opposite of tangent theta. So Gabe, would this be even or odd? Look above our two previous ones.
Odd.
It's odd, okay? All right, so we've said that the sine of 30 is 1/2. William, what was the sine of 150?
-1.
What quadrant is 150 degrees in? Second. It's positive. All right, so here's my big idea. The sine of 180 minus theta is the same as sine theta. So do you see 150 and 30 are supplementary angles? They are two positive angles that add up to 180. All right, cosine 30, we already did above, was square root 3 over 2. Max, what do you get for cosine 150?
Negative square root 3 over 2.
There you go. So here's my big idea. The cosine of 180 minus theta is the opposite of cosine theta. All right, above we did tangent 30. That was square root 3 over 3. All right, Avery, what did you get for tangent 150? Or we can do it together. Yeah, okay, all students, it's the same.
So here's the big idea. The tangent of 180 minus theta is the opposite of tangent theta. Again, I'm not suggesting you memorize any of these. Just go, like, if you're asked, and so you're going to see this on the homework, when you're asked to do these, stop and like plug in a number for theta and then do the 180 minus and say, okay, it's the opposite, it's the same, and then you can write it in general. All right, does this make sense now that I've kind of pulled it together for you? All right, so now we're going to label the unit circle. Some of you got to it, some of you did not. So this is 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 1. And if I plot a point, we're going to call it x, y. The radius is 1. And what I want us to look at now, this is going to develop a very, very popular identity for trig. We use it all the time in pre-calculus, and in AP Calculus it does appear. So we know from Pythagorean theorem, and I did this before with you, but I want to do it again. All right, all together, what is the x-coordinate? Cosine theta. Everybody, what's the y-coordinate? Sine theta. So x is cosine theta, y is sine theta. So we could write cosine theta squared plus sine theta squared. Now that 1 was 1 squared, okay? So that's 1. Now, I'm not sure where the origin of this came from, but in trig, we don't write, because it gets so cumbersome to put cosine theta the quantity squared. The convention is we write cosine with a little 2 stands for cosine theta squared, okay? So you just have to get used to it, and I wrote it down here. So if you look at number 9, it says calculate cosine squared of 30 degrees plus sine squared 30 degrees. Well, we just did this. Cosine 30 was square root 3 over 2. Sine 30 was 1/2. So that's 3/4 plus 1/4 equals 1. So I actually could have figured this out without ever working it out, because it's of the form cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta. And I know for any theta, as long as the thetas are the same, okay, it has to be the same angle. I can't do cosine squared pi over 6 and then sine squared pi over 4. Like that doesn't work. It has to be the same angle theta in both spots. All right, so I'm going to pause a moment, and I want you to try 1 and 2. For number 1, this is what we did today. And number 2, you part of this is from what we did previously, and this is going to help with number 8 from last night's homework, which I'll talk about. But then it'll tie into today. So look above, think about it, try these 2. Again, you're not expected to memorize these, but you are expected to be able to reason them out. So if you're not sure if cosine negative theta is cosine theta or the opposite,
Make it an easier problem. Do cosine 30 and then do cosine negative 30. Is it the same or the opposite? And then you can proceed. Does that make sense? You're not, let me say it again, this is really important. You're not expected to memorize these properties, but you are expected to be able to reason them out. So when you look at this is no calculator. So the quiz next week, I haven't quite decided how to divide calculator, no calculator. It will be predominantly no calculator, but there are some things I want you to do with the calculator. All right, I'm seeing a lot of perplexed people. So let's look at this. If you come up here, do you remember cosine of negative theta is the same thing as cosine theta? So for letter A, this is going to be the same as cosine theta. So that's 0.68. It's the same. Now, when you do cosine pi minus theta, if it helps you to put it in degrees. So here's what I want you to think about. If theta is 30, cosine 30 is square root 3 over 2. Then cosine 180 minus 30 is cosine 150. It's the opposite, right? This is what I mean by reason it out. So this is going to be the opposite. So it's negative 0.68. Does that make sense now? How you can reason it out. Then number 2, if cosine theta is 3 over 5, and again, this is no calculator, and theta is between 0 and pi over 2, you want to play the what do I know game. What does this piece right here, theta is between 0 and pi over 2, what's that telling us? Awesome. That is in the first quadrant. All right. The next thing, what do I know about the cosine function? Humira, what do you know in general about a cosine function?
It's adjacent to hypotenuse.
Okay, so we know at the very base that cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a triangle in the first quadrant, and I know cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. All right? Then, Matthew, what do you know in general about the sine function?
It's opposite over hypotenuse.
Awesome. It's opposite over hypotenuse. So I would need to figure out the opposite. And what do you know about this triangle? What is the opposite? It's 4. You shouldn't even have to work it out. So then, if I know this, and sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, Liam, what's sine theta then?
Wait, can you repeat it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you know that the sine function is the opposite of theta over the hypotenuse, in this triangle, what's sine theta? What side is opposite of theta? 4. And what's the hypotenuse? Yeah, you knew it. I knew you knew it. All right. And then, Hannah, what do you know about tangent theta? It's opposite over adjacent. Then, Brennan, what is tangent theta? 4 over 3. All right, now, for letter C, we're going to reason this out, okay? Don't give up. This means the sine of 90 degrees minus theta. So I'm going to play the what do I know game. Let's say I let theta be 30 degrees. What's the sine of 30? 1/2. Okay, well, what's the sine of 90 minus 30? What's the sine of 60? Isn't that radical 3 over 2? So that's not the opposite of sine theta, okay? So it's not the same. So that's not helping me. But what does square root 3 over 2, what's something else that's equal to? Cosine 30. Oh, look, that's the theta, right? I let that be the theta. So this is cosine theta, which is 3/5.